Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 6 questions in 9 minutes because leaders know how to be concise. We'll go ahead and get started with today's guest. Our first question, in a few sentences, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, Sean. Thanks very much for having me on. My name is Jim St. Clair. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for a small Maryland-based professional services firm called the Dinocrates Group. Dinocrates was the chief architect for Alexander the Great, and the company founder, Tom Prokop, encountered a few years ago. And so we like to say that we're here to architect your conquest.
I like that. That's a great tagline. That's a great way to approach it. Well, question number 2, what's the best thing about working with a team?
I think the greatest thing about working with a team specifically, or especially as someone who has worked from home and virtually for so many years, is an opportunity to both introduce and validate ideas on concepts and projects that you're working on. A team, regardless of the state in which it's being formed in the forming, storming, norming sort of concepts, immediately introduces you to new ideas. And even in the most negative circumstances, it prompts you to validate what your concepts might be, your ideas, even just validate what you're working on as a team and if it's going in the right direction. It's some fundamental level of human interaction around a goal or around a concept that I think moves your thinking forward.
That's a great ideas on the validation of ideas within teams. I love that. Question number 3, I hear from other leaders of teams that it can be a challenge to get team members engaged. Tell us your thoughts.
That's a great question. And I was just reading week before last, Microsoft's consulting services did their own internal engagement in the midst of this move to virtual and analyze what's going on with teams. What they saw was whole new patterns emerging in terms of how teams communicated, how they related to each other virtually in ways they hadn't physically before. And it really showed how teams, especially teams with any level of maturity, sought out new ways to stay connected virtually that they weren't physically, which means teams as a team structure, I think oftentimes have to have some sort of common idea or norm that they're working from. And with that, communications paths then begin to flow. So even when faced with a virtual challenge, if you want to get an idea to someone, you find that communications medium that's easiest to reach them, and the communication still continues to flow. And on the upside, you might find new ways to communicate or even new time frames to communicate, perhaps in the evening or chats over weekend that weren't within the boundaries of the work construct for the team before, and allows for a different flow of ideas.
Wow, those are great points. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Sure.
Question number 4, what other piece of advice would you offer to leaders of teams?
You know, that's a great one. And coming from both a former military perspective and then just the evolution of the corporate world, I only offer for my success just being open. I find it, as a personal challenge, it's very easy for me historically to walk in and tell people, okay, here's where we're going to go and how we're going to do it. But presenting it in a way that is open to comments and considerations and finding, commonalities in those ideas. Sometimes it's a mandate. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm open to a few thoughts, but at the end of the day, we're going to do X. But even in those cases, there's ways to get recommendations and ideas that can help optimize what that approach is, or even provide feedback to leadership as to, well, I know we were going for X, but really X sub A is probably the optimum approach, and we'd like to consider that. So use it as that opportunity for feedback and QA to the team development process overall.
What a great leadership tip about being open and being open to feedback and input. I really appreciate you sharing that. That's some great advice.
Well, my kids think I'm still working on it. So.
Well, certainly it's an ongoing process for all of us to learn how to exchange ideas and do it in a respectful way, but in a productive way at the same time. Right. But, great insights, Jim. I appreciate you sharing those. Question number 5, what other successful leaders of teams, such as yourself, would you like to recognize that have had a positive influence in your life?
Wow, that's a great question, and I find myself unprepared for some names, but I know just looking at some of the mentors I've had, there have been folks in my earlier days that, without my realizing at first, were laying the groundwork for team management and team concepts in different environments that guided me in ways that I didn't recognize till years later. One of my first managers was a gentleman by the name of Mel Rushing, and Mel, professionally and philosophically, was a tremendous source of guidance, both in terms of how to manage a team and around understanding customer expectations. And I have found principles that he inferred to me that I've still used years later. So I'm happy to call him out as one. A few leaders that I had on active duty in the Navy that did the same thing. And in many cases, it took a while to realize the direction of how they were managing things and realize that they were getting the most from the team, and that they were moving you in a direction that they wanted you to go without even you realizing it and accepting it as your own idea. So.
That's always a sign of a really effective leader, when you're growing and you don't
Absolutely.
even realize it. That's
right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for recognizing those individuals. And also, Jim, thank you for your service to our country as well. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Last question. Tell us about your first job.
So my first job was working as a summer intern on a program when I was overseas. So I went to high school overseas at a DoD school in England. I think it was a good model for the time. I have no idea if they kept up with it, but they offered summer hire programs. So if you expect that, American teenager who is constrained by a military facility in a foreign country where you don't really have a chance to go out and work in the foreign economy, they offered summer hire positions on base, which were MWR funded, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Program funded, and let you work in anything from, kind of menial jobs to office administration. I really enjoyed them because they gave me a chance to interact on base and do things in a military context and learn, different leadership styles early on, even when I wasn't even realizing it, and get paid minimum wage at the same time. So they were office administrations, but it gave me some insights into how the base worked and the organization worked, and learn some things, plus make a few dollars on the side besides just flipping burgers.
Wow, that's some great experience. I hear all sorts of great stories about people's first jobs, but I really like yours because it's provided you, it sounds like, and I guess for a lot of people it does. It provides them with a lot of clarity on what they want to do when they get a little bit older and more into a profession. But thanks so much for sharing that. And Jim, thank you for being on the podcast today. How can people find you?
Two best ways are social media. I'm on LinkedIn under Jim St. Clair, and my Twitter handle is @JSt. Clair1.
Very good. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, you can find us on LinkedIn by searching Blue Sky Business Consulting. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great day.